We have great breaking news involving Vice President JD Vance, who continues to work hard to change American culture, or in many respects, restore it back in favor of our right to keep and bear arms. You're going to love what he had to say this morning at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. Yes, it does touch fingers with our Second Amendment rights. We'll talk about it. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment at the 2025 Gundies. Thank you for your support. Okay, exciting day in the Second Amendment. JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States, gave a powerful speech this morning to the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. And a lot of what he talked about touched fingers with religious freedoms. The First Amendment. We talk about the First Amendment, which of course is one of the boxes of the four boxes of American liberty. The box being, of course, the soapbox, speaking to the right of free speech, and religious freedom, the ability to pray and talk about your religion freely in the United States under the First Amendment of the Constitution. But J.D. Vance talked not just about religious freedom and the war on Catholics, the war on religious people perpetrated by Joe Biden and his minions over the last 4 years. J.D. Vance specifically talked about our right to keep and bear arms. Here's what he had to say, and let me then break it down why it's so important that he said this to a room full of religious conservatives to Catholics. Let's roll the tape.
So when the COVID pandemic happened, I had a 3-week-old baby at home, and I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I bought 900 rounds of ammunition, and then I went to Walmart, and I bought 2 bags of rice, and I sat at home with my bags of rice and my 900 rounds of ammunition and said, all right, we're just going to wait this thing out.
This is great stuff. Now, here's the thing, folks. We must always remember the basic principle, most articulated, or best articulated, if you will, by Andrew Breitbart, the late founder of Breitbart News. And that is, politics and policymaking are downstream from culture. You got to win the cultural wars. You got to win the culture. You got to capture the culture, if you will. And if you do that, by extension, the policies and politics that are consistent with that culture will follow. That's why the old saying, politics is downstream from culture, is understood to be true in so many instances. Now, the reason why this ties in with this powerful statement made by Vice President JD Vance to the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast this morning is here he is talking to a group of people about religious freedom and the First Amendment and war on Catholics and war on conservatives. And in the context of that, he talks about the right to keep and bear arms, the fact that he went out there and acquired 900 rounds of ammunition at the start of COVID and foodstuffs in the form of rice. This is very important because, again, people do like to know they're not alone in their views, in their beliefs, in what they support. People like to be surrounded, as a general matter, by other people that share their values, that share their cultural feelings, the cultural norms. They generally like it. The reason why this is important is here you have J.D. Vance not talking to the NRA. He's not talking to the Gun Owners of America. He's not talking to the Second Amendment Foundation. He's talking to a group of Catholics at one of the most important Catholic events every year in Washington, D.C. And in the context that he shares with this room and a national television audience, that he personally, to protect himself and his family and his community, goes out there and acquires privately owned firearms and ammunition. This is not a political statement per se. What this really is speaking to American gun culture. And remember, as we talked about on this channel before, America does not have a gun culture. That is what people have always said. We do not have a gun culture. that is a little sloppy. And I think I'm one of the few people to point this out, but you should take it and you should run with it. America does not have a gun culture. What America has that makes us unique in the world is we have a private gun ownership, self-defense oriented gun culture. A gun culture could be something like in England, where everyone has double-barrel shotguns and goes skeet shooting, and maybe they hunt quail or something. In one sense, that is a gun culture, but it's a hunting gun culture. And if you use a gun for self-defense in the United Kingdom, you get to go to prison. There's famous cases about that. So don't just say we have a gun culture in the United States. We have a private gun ownership, self-defense oriented gun culture, which is distinguished from a hunting culture, for example, or a sporting gun culture like clays and the like. This is extremely important when JD Vance, to this room full of Catholics and conservative, religious conservatives, literally talks about privately acquiring ammunition, and by extension guns, because why do you need ammo if you don't have, you got to have guns to have ammo to make any sense, right? So he's talking about his private ownership of firearms, his private ownership of ammunition and weaponry in this context. This is not a political statement. This is a cultural statement. He is telling people in the room it is okay. It is acceptable. In fact, it is good for you and the people in this room and your families and the people in your communities and all Americans to embrace our self-defense oriented private gun ownership culture. And it's statements like this to these kind of diverse groups of, in this case, a huge room full of Catholics and conservative religious leaders at a prayer breakfast to talk about gun ownership is a very big deal, because it helps influence in a favorable way America's self-defense oriented private gun culture. So I think this is great news, and I think JD Vance has always done great on guns. He's always been good on this. And in fact, I think when he won his Senate seat in Ohio, he defeated a classic anti-gun politician who had all the endorsements of your usual anti-gun suspects. Now, I should also mention that J.D. Vance had previously talked about how his grandmother, when she passed away, had 19 loaded handguns in her home. Again, private gun ownership for self-defense. You don't use handguns for skeet shooting. You use handguns for self-defense as a general matter. And that's, again, further evidence of the importance of the Trump administration with J.D. Vance talking about guns. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about why this is so important and why the anti-gun movement understands what I just said. The anti-gun movement in America completely understands and agrees with everything I just articulated, 100%. But because of that, their steps, and if you look very carefully at this, you can see their plan. The anti-gun movement doesn't just want to outlaw stuff. Of course they do. They want to ban all guns and put us all in prison. That's a fact. That's, in my view, that's what they want to do ultimately. They want to get rid of all the guns. And they need to do it incrementally, step by step. And that's what they're trying to do. But they also understand get to that outcome, they must change American culture in a way that makes us not American. They must make us anti-gun European squishy types. Right? That's where they want to move gun culture. And the reason why I spend time on videos dealing with the Second Amendment protection of, let's say, young adults that are 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, the reason why I spend time on some of these sort of tangential things like protecting the gun industry from lawsuits by the government of Mexico, even though it may not apparently directly impact you, is because these attacks by the anti-gun movement are really attacks not just on politics and law, but also on our culture. Because if you make it hard for young people to learn about guns in school, so you ban the teaching of guns, if you prevent young people who are interested in the Second Amendment from wearing a hat that says, 2A, or come and take it with a photo of a cannon, or any of these things, what you're doing is making it harder for young people to learn about our self-defense, privately gun ownership culture and history as a country. You're making it difficult. You're trying to rewrite American history and write out of history our Second Amendment, our right to keep and bear arms, the fact that the American Revolution was not really fought about taxes. It was actually started over gun control. Right, you write that part of history out. You basically, and I have an entire video I've sketched out. I got to get to this. You basically write out of American history the role of the militia. You write out of history the role of the militia, and you embrace the role of the branches of government, the Army and the Navy and whatnot. And obviously they played an important role, but we have written out, it's borderline stolen valor, by the way, but at a minimum, we don't need to get into that specific debate, but we certainly have written out of history the privately owned militias. And I may be bringing that back at some point, but we'll get to that down the road. But for today, you got to understand that the anti-gun movement does understand the importance of destroying American self-defense-oriented gun culture. They want to do this by scaring off middle-class Americans to basically convince them that if they buy guns or get involved with guns or use guns for self-defense, they are risking their lives, they're risking their families, they're risking prison terms, they're risking their middle-class lifestyle by going bankrupt, which, for example, was why the anti-gun movement is always trying to expand the ability to sue people, to destroy them financially, engage in lawfare, whether it be the parents of kids that engage in shooting, which, of course, we don't like the shootings, of course, but the point is to hold parents liable in all instances seems a little unjust, because what you're trying to do there, of course, is scare the parents into not allowing their kids to touch guns until they're in their mid-20s, and then at that point, maybe they won't be interested in guns. All this, trying to get guns out of gaming. There's a big push to get guns off Broadway in the theater community. There's a push to get guns out of Hollywood movies. There's a push to get guns out of, video games and so on and so on. In fact, I just recently read about a push to try to tell kids who play video games involving guns, like Call of Duty, presumably, and Fortnite and all these other kinds of guns. I'm not a first-person shooter game guy. I'm a Madden NFL football guy, but set that issue aside. The reality is that there's an attempt to try to tell the kids that play these video games, keep the guns in the game, don't touch guns outside of the games. There's all these kinds of things going on. Why? Because the anti-gun movement wants to destroy American gun culture. And I'll just leave you with this historical moment, this historical fact that I think you will appreciate and understand the importance of how if you destroy habits, if you destroy traditions, if you destroy a culture, you do hugely influence American modern life. And I think that is the long-standing history, tradition, and habits of Americans going out to movie theaters to see movies in theaters. Before you had COVID, people would frequently go to the movies. They would watch the Oscars on TV. They would go to the theaters. They would buy popcorn and soda and candy, and they'd hang out with the family, and they'd be in the theater watching a movie in a movie theater. COVID destroyed that habit. It destroyed that culture. And it's never really come back in any real way, because COVID changed the habits of American consumers when it comes to movie viewing habits, from going to the movie to see the latest, greatest movie to, we'll just watch that movie at home when it starts to stream. You see what happened? And what the anti-gun movement wants to do with American self-defense-oriented private gun ownership culture is they want to do the same thing that happened to the movie industry, to the theater movie industry, and that is get people in America that no one cares about guns, they don't own guns, they don't touch guns, they don't want guns, and destroy the habit, the tradition, the culture of Americans have when it comes to private gun ownership and using them for self-defense to protect themselves, their family, and their communities. They want to destroy that tradition. It's not the only American tradition, of course, liberals want to destroy, but this is a big one because, as you know, if they can take the guns from us, they immediately convert us from being citizens into serfs, subjects, and perhaps even worse. So there you have it, folks. So I think it's great news that JD Vance is out there talking to diverse groups of people, not just gun-related groups, talking about our Second Amendment rights, talking about guns, talking about his personal use of guns, his personal acquisition of ammunition. This is all great because the more you normalize gun ownership, the more you normalize using guns for self-defense, the harder it is for the anti-gun movement and their billions of dollars to destroy our right to keep and bear arms and to eliminate the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And I don't think that's going to happen, but we have to fight to make sure it doesn't. They got a lot of work to do, and the work is being done, I suspect, all across this great country. So there you have it, folks. Hope you learned something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. Make sure you follow me on X at Four Boxes Diner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and Rumble. We're almost at 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, so I hope you help me get there. And again, thank you very much for tuning in, and we will talk to you again very, very soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.